Growing up, I always felt more like a burden than a daughter that my parents really wanted. My father, a corporate lawyer in his mid-50s, and my mother, a real estate agent in her early 50s, were much more interested in maintaining their upper-middle-class image than in being real parents. They had me relatively young, and it often seemed like my existence was more of an inconvenience to their lifestyle. In our house, appearances were everything. My parents loved to project an image of success and stability, but behind closed doors, things were very different, although I didn't understand it as a child. Now I know that they treated me more like an unpaid helper than a daughter. Any achievement or dream I had was ignored or belittled. I would bring home good grades or awards, only to hear what I was supposed to do better, with no congratulations. Over time, it became clear that my value to them depended on how much I could maintain their image or reduce their load. But things really escalated in my last year of high school. Out of the blue, my mother lost her job. She never gave me a clear explanation of what happened, so I don't know if she was fired or voluntarily resigned, but she stopped working completely. At the same time, my dad was fired from the law firm where he had worked for years. Losing both incomes, their seemingly perfect life began to fall apart. They struggled to keep up with mortgage payments, bills, and all the expenses they were used to, partly because they were living a more expensive life than they could afford. When they lost their jobs, everything fell apart like a house of cards. Suddenly, all their pent-up frustration, despair, and financial instability were directed straight at me. I had been trying hard in school, juggling my studies with a part-time job to save for college and contribute to my own expenses. I finally got a scholarship that would cover most of my tuition, which was a huge relief given my parents' financial situation. But when I shared the news with them, expecting at least some pride or encouragement, all I got were questions about how that money could be useful for the family. My dad started hinting that I should stay home, give up my scholarship, and work full-time to help with the financial burdens. My mom even suggested that college could wait and that a real adult would help out their family. The final blow came when I found out that the modest college savings fund my grandfather had set up for me had been completely emptied. They used it to pay off some of their own debts without telling me. When I confronted them, there were no apologies, just explanations of how it was necessary to keep the family afloat. I was devastated. I remember feeling like they had stolen a future from me. They had no interest in seeing me achieve anything. So, at 18, I packed up and moved to a nearby city to attend college on my own. I'm not going to tell you that everything was easy, but being away felt like a weight was lifted off my shoulders. That's what gave me the strength to keep fighting at all times. Fast forward a few years. I finished my degree and received an offer for a full-time job in another state. The job was pretty good because, in addition to benefits, it would give me everything I had been fighting for. I moved again, this time hundreds of miles away, and I started over. I felt so free. I could afford my own apartment. 2 years passed since that move, and I hadn't heard a word from my parents. I thought they had finally accepted that I was done serving their needs. But a week ago, I got some messages from them saying they wanted to reconnect and were planning to visit me with a special surprise for me. They kept saying I would be so happy with the surprise and acted like nothing happened, like we were a normal family that had just lost touch. They acted as if we had a wonderful family bond that could be rekindled with a simple visit. They implied that their surprise would fix things between us, whatever that meant. Given our history, I couldn't help but suspect that every surprise they had given me before was a way to manipulate me or make me feel guilty. When I politely declined their visit, they didn't take it well. Soon, I started getting messages from other family members, all trying to make me feel guilty, so I would change my mind. They would say things like, "Your parents are trying to get closer because they miss you. You have to see the effort they make." But after everything I went through, I really owed them another chance. Reddit, am I wrong for wanting to be free after everything my parents put me through? Am I wrong for refusing to let them into my life now that I finally have the chance to live on my own terms? Update 1. First, I want to thank everyone who took the time to respond. I especially thank those who have shared their own stories. I don't know if they have their stories public on the subreddit, but from what I've read, it would be good if they did. Since many of you pointed out that they get lost in the comments, something I hadn't initially noticed is that my parents' whole approach to reconciling, by showing up unannounced and promising a surprise, especially one that appears to be financial from some details in their message, shows that they still don't understand what they've done. For them, Money can solve all the problems, when all I wanted from them when I lived in their house was to be treated like a daughter. Only after posting the story, things actually escalated on their own. Yesterday morning, I got a call from my aunt, my mother's sister, who has always been more of a spectator than an ally, but who occasionally communicates to give family advice. She wasted no time in asking me why I had refused to allow my parents to visit me or what was going on. Apparently, my parents had confided their plans to her, including this surprise they were so eager to give me. According to my aunt, my parents supposedly have been attending family therapy for the past year. They told her they had been reflecting on how they treated me in the past and had realized their mistakes. The surprise they had been planning was, according to my aunt, a trust fund they had set up in my name using some of their savings as an apology and a way to make amends. They believed that this gesture could repair our relationship and show me that they are committed to change. On the one hand, the fact that they had saved to create something that they thought would benefit me felt like an acknowledgement of some sort, and part of me wanted to believe that they had really changed. But then, the more I thought about it, the more frustrated I became that their supposed plan for reconciliation still revolved around money and grand gestures, the same things that created the distance between us. At first, I felt like they were trying to buy my forgiveness instead of working on the relationship through open communication and respect. Maybe if they had approached me, asking what my life was like, normal for parents with their daughter, maybe I would have agreed to meet up. But instead, they were just throwing money at the problem, as they always have done. After hearing my aunt's story, I decided it was time to address this directly. Yesterday afternoon, I sat down and wrote a long email to my parents, explaining everything. I thanked them for the effort they said they had put into therapy and acknowledged that it is a big step if they are really taking responsibility for how they treated me. But I also explained to them that surprising me with a visit and using a financial gesture as a means of apology was not the right way to start rebuilding our relationship. I told them straight up that if they really were committed to moving forward, it had to start with respect for my boundaries and a willingness to communicate directly about what happened, not trying to buy forgiveness. In the email, I was very clear that I would not accept any visits or meetings unless we first established some ground rules. I suggested starting with regular phone calls or messages where we could both gradually build the relationship and discuss past issues in a way that made me feel safe. I explained to them that rebuilding our relationship would take time and that I needed to see sustained change, not just a one-time gift or gesture. I even mentioned that if therapy was really helping them, they should know that reconciliation takes work, not just money or big surprises. After I sent the email, I felt a huge wave of relief. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was setting the terms of how things would happen. This morning, I got a reply from my parents, and it was a lot. At first, they were polite, saying that they appreciate my honesty and were willing to follow my lead if it meant fixing things. But then, as the email progressed, it became clear that they were already backing off. My mother wrote a paragraph about how families shouldn't need formal rules or boundaries, and that if they really wanted to reconcile, I should have been more willing to allow them to visit me and talk in person. My father's part was more direct. He felt hurt because I refused his gift, saying that it cost them a lot of effort and that he felt disrespected by my refusal to accept his attempt at reconciliation. It seemed that they were shifting the blame to me by implying that by setting boundaries, I was the one refusing to reconcile. As if that wasn't enough, my mother also included a line about how I've always been independent to a fault, which hurt. Then I realized they hadn't really changed. Later that night, I received another call from my aunt. She had clearly spoken to my parents after they received my email, and now she was calling to reason with me, although it felt more like an attempt to make me feel guilty. She kept saying things like, "They're really trying, you know? It's not easy for them either, and maybe you're being a little harsh. They just want to prove that they've changed." They even mentioned that their therapist had apparently encouraged them to communicate with me and that the trust fund was a product of those sessions, as if that justified their whole approach. It seemed like they were all trying to convince me that accepting her gesture would solve everything when, deep down, I knew it wouldn't. By the end of the conversation with my aunt, I was exhausted. Mentally exhausted from having to explain over and over again. All of this felt like more of the same manipulation I grew up with, just disguised with different words and actions. I felt like I was being pushed into a corner. It's almost as if by setting boundaries, I was being punished or accused of not trying hard enough to fix things. I never wanted any of this. I never wanted to be forced into the role of the ungrateful daughter, just because I'm not giving in to their version of going back to the way things were before. I'm over my parents, and if they don't want to make the effort to mend the relationship genuinely, then there's nothing I can do. Update 2. I really didn't expect things to escalate as much as they have in the past few days. After I sent that last email and was firm about my boundaries, I was hoping my parents would back off and respect my decision. But things have gotten even more complicated, and I'm starting to see how far they are willing to go to try and regain control over me. 2 days after my last post, I woke up to a text message from an unknown number. It simply said, "Hope you are doing well in your new city. Don't think you can hide away forever. We'll see each other soon." At first, I assumed it was spam or some random scam message, but upon rereading it, something in the tone was all too familiar to me. It was eerily similar to the way my dad used to leave me reminder messages when he wanted to make me feel guilty or anxious about something. I tried to ignore it, but it definitely got on my nerves. Later that day, I received an email from my dad. It was a long message with a formal tone in which he expressed his disappointment in me. My answers did not directly threaten anything, but the language was intentional. He mentioned that I was his only daughter and, as such, it was my moral responsibility to show them some respect, come to a middle ground, and at least consider their attempts at reconciliation. He also included a sentence about how they had invested so much in my education and upbringing, and that now is not the time to repay them with silence and distance. Reading between the lines, I felt he was implying that my success and independence were things I owed them, and that it was my duty to keep them close out of gratitude. I was furious, but it also confirmed my fear that they were not going to respect my space. That night, I called a close friend who had known me and my family for years. She listened to everything and then calmly reminded me that my parents had always crossed boundaries and that this was probably their way to test how much I would endure before giving in. She told me it was okay to keep my distance and that I wasn't obligated to let them back into my life on their terms, especially if it was causing me so much stress. I felt a huge sense of relief, knowing I wasn't alone in feeling their behavior was manipulative. But it didn't stop there. The next day, I noticed that my parents had followed me on Instagram, a platform I used to stay connected with friends from college. But it was unsettling to see them pop up now. Even strangers noticed that my mom had liked some old posts on my profile, the last one about 2 years ago when I moved to the state for work. It felt like they were trying hard to leave their mark, as if they wanted to remind me that they could still keep an eye on me. That night, I got a text from my aunt again. She asked me if I had talked to my parents recently, saying that they were worried and didn't know how else to contact me, since I had been so closed off. She told me that they knew where I lived. She hinted that they were considering flying out here for a quick visit to talk things over. My aunt introduced it as if it was no big deal, saying that they just wanted to clarify their intentions and that they were just going to show up to give me some clarity. But the way she spoke made it clear that they had already decided to come. My aunt even added that I was exaggerating and that this situation was not as serious as I was making it seem. The worst part of it all was realizing that they knew exactly where I lived. When I moved here 2 years ago, I never shared my address. I realized that they could have found my address through other relatives, or even through an online search. I shuddered to think that they had been silently watching me. I was horrified, but not entirely surprised. Feeling uneasy, I sent them another email, making it very clear that I was not comfortable with surprise visits, and reminding them once again that I needed space. I explained that if they really wanted to make amends, it would have to be done respectfully, and without trying to track me down or follow me online. Their response came quickly. My mother responded with a long, guilt-ridden message, saying that they couldn't believe I was treating them like strangers and that it broke their hearts to see me so distant and ungrateful after everything they had done for me. She talked about how family should always be there for each other and that they were only trying to support me in a way that they thought I would appreciate. Everything was framed as if they were doing me a huge favor by being persistent and that I was too stubborn to understand their love. She even said that one day I would look back and regret pushing them away when all they wanted was to help me. After reading that, I was a little upset. I took a few hours to calm down and then sent a last message, firmly stating that if they showed up at my home uninvited, I would call the police. I made it very clear that I was serious, that this was not a negotiation, and that if they really respected me, they needed to back off and allow me to live my life without interference. I also told them that I would use these emails in case they did something as proof that they did not have permission to show up at my house. The next day, I received a call from a cousin on my father's side, who rarely calls me. She had heard through the family that I had threatened my parents with calling the police and wanted to know what was going on. At that moment, I felt like my life had become some kind of twisted family soap opera, with everyone getting involved and throwing their opinions at each other. My cousin kept saying things like, "Your parents have been through a lot, and there is no way to resolve this peacefully." I could hardly believe what I was hearing. It seemed like everyone was reading from the same script, trying to make me feel guilty. In a moment of desperation, I checked my social media profiles and adjusted all my privacy settings, even going so far as to block certain family members who had shown interest in intruding. I also decided to get a P.O. box for any future correspondence because I realized they might start sending letters to my address if I continued to resist their attempts to contact me. Yesterday, something happened that solidified my decision to hold my boundaries firm. I received a notification from my building's management office, saying there was a visitor asking if I lived there. Luckily, the staff at the front desk didn't give them any information, but the description sounded eerily like my father. And here I am now, holding my ground but feeling a mix of exhaustion and fear. Update 3. It's been almost a month since everything escalated, and thankfully, several things have happened that have given me some peace. I have good news. My boyfriend and I decided that it was time to move together to a new place. We had been considering it for a long time, but after all this incident with my parents, we felt even more sure that it was the best thing to do. We found a small but cozy apartment in a nearby town that feels like a new beginning, away from the old address my parents had somehow tracked down. We finalized the move last week, and although I'm still keeping my guard up, I feel like there's finally some space between them and me. It's a huge relief to know that now they would have to try even harder to find me again. I hope they don't try. Throughout this whole process, I have kept in close contact with my friend who has been my constant support during these chaotic weeks. She recently attended a meeting where my parents happened to be present. I wasn't too thrilled to find out they would be in the same place, but I trusted her judgment. It seems my parents have taken their narrative to a whole new level. They have been telling anyone who will listen that I have abandoned them, that I am ungrateful, and that they raised me with nothing but love just for me to leave and despise them. My friend remained calm at first, listening to what they were saying without interrupting. But things escalated as they painted a picture of me as a spoiled child who used them to exhaustion and left them as soon as I no longer needed them. They spoke of my lack of respect for family values and how broken they were because I refused to forgive them. My mother apparently even went so far as to talk about all the things they supposedly sacrificed for me while I was growing up, turning it into something like I had turned my back on my duties towards them. I was absolutely disgusted hearing this. Everything they were saying was so twisted, a distorted version of the reality I lived. But my friend didn't let it go. She intervened, confronted them directly in front of everyone, and told the truth. She told everyone about the years of manipulation and emotional abuse that they put me through, how they constantly ignored me and controlled me, how they used me for financial help when it suited them, and how they only turned to me now for convenience. She mentioned that they tried to track me down, ignored my boundaries, and even tried to show up uninvited even though I asked them not to. Nothing was saved. I was left speechless listening to her tell it. She really came to my defense in a way I didn't even know I needed. The most surprising thing was that my parents didn't deny a single thing she said. They just sat there in silence, listening with just a few occasional murmurs like, "We did a lot for her," or, "But she's our daughter." Not once did they try to refute what she was saying. They didn't deny her actions or explain their side of the story. They just seemed uncomfortable and embarrassed by what my friend told them. It was clear that, for once, they were confronting people who weren't going to automatically take their side. They were no longer able to control the narrative, and I think they finally realized how much they had screwed things up. After that, my friend said there was a noticeable change in how people interacted with my parents. They lost that social status that they had always relied on. The people who used to approach them now avoided them, not wanting to get involved in the disaster they had created. They were left alone, having to face the consequences of their actions, stripped of the support they had always used to reinforce their image. But talking to my friend, who is a lawyer, he said that maybe all this insistence from my parents has to do with the fact that they want to avoid me suing them for having taken the money from my grandfather's fund. maybe this money was the way to avoid all this. I never thought about that fund because certainly I didn't have money to pay a lawyer. I didn't even know if there was a legal basis to sue them because I don't know how that fund is structured. But now that I have money and my friend can help me get a good lawyer who specializes in that, I think I can take that route. Also, even if I end up spending more money on lawyers than I can recover from the fund, at least that will put an end to this whole matter. So, I contacted my parents and told them that I was willing to accept the fund only if they promised to stop bothering me. I thought if I told them that, it would make them angry because at the end of the day, they wanted to rebuild the relationship with me. But instead, they said they would respect my decision, even though we should meet in person so I can sign the papers for the new fund. Of course, I had no intention of meeting them like that. I asked them to send the papers to me to sign and return them. At first, they said it would be better to see each other in person to do it, but I insisted that they should send them since I don't have much time, and that would be faster. I would simply receive them and sign them quickly to finish with all this. So, they have agreed to do it. However, my friend is going to review it, and from there, we will take the decision of what the next step is, whether to sue or just accept that money to end the matter. Update 4. To start, my friend, the lawyer who has been my rock throughout this process, already reviewed the documents my parents sent. As we suspected, the terms included a clause that if I accepted this new fund, I would also give up any right to sue them in the future through my grandfather's original fund. The most surprising, or maybe not so surprising thing, is that the new fund they've generously created in my name is only $5,000. That might sound like a decent amount, but when you realize that my grandfather's original fund was worth around $45,000, the $40,000 difference is pretty hard to ignore. So, I decided that not only am I going to reject their offer, but I am also going to sue them to get the complete money back from my grandfather's fund. I already met with the lawyer who will be handling the case, and although I know it won't be cheap, he believes there is a good chance of winning. It seems that my parents were not very careful in using the fund, and there is enough evidence to prove that the money was intended exclusively for my education. The lawyer is gathering everything needed to file the lawsuit, and the most satisfying part is that my parents have no idea what is coming. Since they sent the papers 2 weeks ago, my parents have been texting me constantly. Each new message seems more nervous than the previous one. At first, they were just reminders that they needed me to sign the papers as soon as possible to close this matter. Then, they started to sound more insistent, asking me if there was a problem and if I needed more time to read the documents. Now, they are entering almost desperate territory, with messages full of phrases like, "We hope everything is okay with you," and "We just want to resolve this in the best way possible." Although I have read every message, I have not responded to any. The reason is simple. I want to give them a surprise. Considering how much they like surprises, I think it will be appropriate for them to find out about my decision to sue them in the most unexpected way possible. Part of me wonders if I should tell them I have a surprise for them and leave them waiting or just let them figure out the lawsuit when the time comes. Update 5. For those who were worried about whether or not I told my parents I had a surprise for them, here is what actually happened. I replied that I had a surprise prepared after all. It seemed fair to return the favor, considering how much they like surprises. However, I decided to leave them in uncertainty for 2 weeks before they finally found out what it was. During that time, they didn't stop bombarding me with messages to find out what the surprise was, but I didn't want to ruin it for them. So, I finally blocked them and waited patiently for them to figure out the surprise on their own. And boy, did they do it. The surprise was the lawsuit we filed to recover the fund from my grandfather. As I found out from my aunt, yes, another of the people who is now also blocked, my parents were furious. I thought they liked surprises. I explained to my aunt in detail why I was suing them, because that money was mine, because they took it without my consent, and because I was no longer willing to tolerate their manipulations. Despite that, she stayed on their side. So I decided to block her too. I don't have the time or patience to deal with more family dramas. As for the lawsuit itself and its results, I have good news. I finally got the money back from my grandfather's fund. This result is a huge relief because although it was an exhausting process, it was worth it. Part of the money will be used to cover the lawyer's fees, which, by the way, are not cheap, but there is still enough left to make some repairs in the new place that I share with my boyfriend. The feeling of having recovered what is mine and taking another step to protect my independence is priceless. However, I must be honest. I do not recommend anyone go through a lawsuit if they can avoid it. It is literally one of the most stressful processes in the world, with the endless paperwork involved. Between signing the paperwork, preparing for the case, and the constant legal back and forth, I felt like I was going crazy. If we hadn't won, I would probably be so mad right now that I wouldn't have even made this update. But luckily, everything turned out okay, and now I can breathe a little easier. Something else I've done with this money, that at the end of the day was always mine, is to improve the security in my new house. Following the recommendations that I received here and from my lawyer, who perhaps also reads Reddit, I installed surveillance cameras in several strategic points. Now, if my parents try something stupid, I will not only know immediately, but I will also have evidence to take action if necessary. I sincerely hope that it doesn't get to that point, but knowing them, I don't plan on taking risks. What do you think about this story? Have you ever experienced something similar, or do you know someone who has? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to hit the notification bell and subscribe to the channel for more amazing stories.